Y'all, Wizard101 is changing nearly every single shadow spell in the upcoming Darkmoor update, and this week, every day, a different content creator is teasing their school's upcoming changes. Today's teaser is a life school themed. Blaze Lifehammer revealed these teasers, and I've linked the original video in the description, but I wanted to talk about what I think these life shadow spell changes are gonna do to the game. Now, today's video is a little different than other teasers because life is such a high health school. All of these spells for every school, you risk taking a maximum of 15% of your max health in backlash, and for life that's about 2500 damage, so you're looking at a very high risk set of spells for life specifically. It's with that context that we're going to be looking at all the teasers, starting right off with the new Shadow Seraph. Now this looks to be a very useful aura spell essentially for that shad. You get both outgoing and damage by using this spell, and in exchange for that shadow pip, you also get a life school pip, which is really good because there's a lot of lore spells that are gonna also be useful for life, like Goat Monk, like Luminous. And for this much offense and heal ability, the only trade-off other than giving up that shadow pip is that you take 15% lash that you have to reduce. And the way this spell works is you have to give up blades, 1 per round for 3 rounds to fully reduce your backlash down to 0. And I'm gonna be honest, lots of outgoing healing, lots of damage, and a very versatile life pip with the spell, but the requirement to have blades is not an easy one. There are luckily spells like Luminous that hit and give you 2 blades, so I think a lot of people, what they're going to be doing is they're going to Luminous into the Shadow Seraph, and then while the Seraph is out, they have a lot of damage output and a way to reduce lash by giving up these Luminous blades 1 round at a time. But Luminous is only 2 blades, and you have to reduce your lash with 3 blades if you want to take 0% lash. That is already kind of crazy, because even 5% lash for a school like life, that is quite a bit. You're looking at like 750 damage with my current HP. Definitely hard to set up. Is it worth the risk? I don't know, mainly just because of how much HP is on the line. That being said, because of that outgoing healing, maybe you could heal off that lash in advance so that you're actually not taking that much damage. Moving right along to the other pure shadow spell that life is getting this update, Dark Seraph. Now this one is very weird because the way you reduce lash with this is if you have traps on self. That's basically what that bottom part of this card is saying. So you start at 15% lash. Every round that you remove a trap on yourself while this is out, you remove 5% of that lash. So essentially, to take no backlash from this spell, you have to have 3 traps on self that your opponent doesn't use or gambit. So it's a very defensive spell. And what are you getting in return for that backlash and the shadow pip? You're getting a small 75 damage shadow wand hit almost, so you can clear debuffs with it, I guess. And you're also getting a very small 680 HP healing. I'm gonna be honest, if that healing is outvalued even by a little bit of backlash, you're basically getting nothing for the shadow pip that you spend on this. This is gonna be the first spell that I'm gonna put at D tier in this entire teaser week thing. It's pretty bad. You're taking the risk of a ton of lash for a little bit of healing. I think this spell is only going to be good based on what you can fuse it with. And what do I mean by fusion? That brings us to the very important point of what they're doing to all shadow enhanced spells, including every life shadow enhanced spell. They're going to be turning all of these into base spells that you have to fuse with pure shadow spells to make shadow enhanced spells that also have backlash attached to them. So we're going to have new base non-shadow spells for all the ones we have, and new shadow enhanceable versions of them that we're going to be going through right now. Starting right off with a new base Grenadier. So this is just what you're going to be able to learn. You're going to have to fuse this with the shadow spell to make a shadow enhanced Grenadier. But this isn't bad at all. I feel like the top path, if you want a very cheap hit that also pacifies, pretty decent. Not terrible. Obviously, it's not that much damage compared to other things that you could do for a similar number of pips, especially in PvE where the top path is only allowed. And the bottom path, it's very similar to another spell that we already have, but basically, right, it hits, and then it does extra damage in the form of bomb dots by giving up blades. Now, the idea of giving up blades for damage over time damage, right? We already see this with Forest Lord. The way this spell works is for up to 4 blades that you have on, you can give it up, and the more blades you give up, the more powerful the damage over time that you create out of this. That's basically how Forest Lord works. Honestly, if it looks complicated too, it's because it's honestly just a complicated spell to use well, because giving up damage blades for more damage in another form is kind of not always a good idea depending on which blades you're giving up. I'm honestly not a fan of giving up a source of damage for more damage. Obviously, there are ways to use off-school blades that wouldn't have given you extra damage anyway, right? There are situations. In PvE, I don't even think those really exist. In PvP, I feel like the risks are always outweighed, because even if you don't take backlash from the base Grenadier, you're still taking a risk by having blades if you're going against someone that punishes blades well. Now, let's say that you were to enhance the base Grenadier with a shadow spell. So they're going to be adding shadow fusion, so you can make more powerful versions of basically these base spells. This is a shadow enhanced Grenadier that we're going to be able to make in the upcoming update. Now, the top path is still a hit and pacify. In case y'all, I didn't really explain pacify. It just means that you basically cannot get targeted by a single target spell while this is out. It's just a very, very good hit. I think this is the new best single hit for its pips in PvE for life. So whatever you need to do to fuse Grenadier with to make this, I think a lot of people should get on that boat, because this is a lot of damage. And the bottom path, instead of giving out blades like the bottom path base Grenadier, this one just basically does a big hit and does 780 damage in the form of 2 bomb dots, meaning you get all the damage on these dots in 5 rounds, not a little bit every round. Now, all of these bomb dots, in case people were confused, they're basically making it so that every single damage overtime on life basically doesn't break shields every round, because while yes, life is a damage overtime school like Fire and Myth, it's not a shield countering school. And a shield countering school, you would expect it to break shields every round with their damage overtimes. That's why bomb dots are a little bit different, and it's basically just a life only thing. But let's say that you were to use either forms of the shadow enhanced Grenadier. In order to reduce lash, you have to have blades on yourself. Once again, you might want to do a Luminous into a Grenadier in PvP, so you don't take 2,500 of your HP in terms of backlash for doing this. I think getting those blades on and keeping them on in PvP is actually a lot easier said than done. I don't know how good this is in PvE though. Let's say that you do a triple blade into the top path. That could be a really good source of damage where you have a way to reduce lash very easily. Moving on to a very, very iconic spell, the new base Hungry Caterpillar. So this is just a new base spell that any life wizard can naturally learn. And I'm gonna be honest, this one is very, very buns. Compared to Grenadier, very, very low damage output. You're looking at a very weak hit that gives you an 800 absorb. Absorbs subtract damage. They're not like shields that divide damage. Well, if a hit's about to do 1,000 damage to you, this absorb will make you take like 200 damage. Yes, that's good, but you're gonna see more damage than 1,000 damage once you go against enough things that are challenging. Very underwhelming spell. I really hope that they change this so that there's more damage and less absorb. That would be cool, because this is very useless. And the other form of Hungry Caterpillar, while yes, it's still a weak hit, at least the utility is pretty cool. It basically clears traps on yourself, so it takes advantage of the trap countering part of life and turns every trap that you counter into a heal that gets more and more powerful the more traps that you clear. I'm gonna assume that every 2 traps creates a new heal, so you're probably gonna be able to get multiple heals out of the spell that are very powerful. I would argue that the best trap counter is still Centaur, because it gives you 40 blades per trap that you clear. It's so much better in terms of offense. So I would argue both forms of base Hungry, they are just very underwhelming in damage, or there's just another thing in Life's Library that does what they do. Pretty useless. Now let's talk about what you get when you fuse the base Hungry with one of the pure shadow spells that we looked at earlier in this video. These are the new shadow enhanced Hungries. Now, at least the one that's allowed in PvE, at least we're looking at a little bit of damage. Keep in mind, for 5 pips and a shad, still less than top path Grenadier. Not the best hit for life. And the other version that is allowed in PvE, it is a really, really good hit. Don't get me wrong. It's only marginally better than the live realm version of Hungry that we have right now. It's slightly less damage, slightly more healing. However, there's backlash attached to it, right? And the worst part about the way you reduce backlash on this, according to the card anyways, it's a defensive move, meaning you need to have traps on self in order to reduce your backlash. Now, you can't put traps on yourself. Your opponent has to put traps on you. So not only are you taking a lot of risk with the backlash, you're just not healing for as much as you would expect out of a spell that could damage you compared to what it does now. And you have to have traps on yourself to get the full-blown value of that healing. I don't know about that. I would probably avoid this spell pretty much altogether in almost every form. Now, base Lamassu, continuing this weird pattern where almost every Mirage spell is like very ass. The top path is a selective targeting spell, meaning it loses damage the more targets you hit it with. And it's not like it starts with that much damage. Very hard to use as well. And Lamassu is another trap clear for blades, just like Centaur, but it's 4 pips. Now this, I could use this over Centaur because the pip cost is lower. And I do like that 3 traps are getting cleared for as little as 4 pips. This one I would argue is a little bit better in terms of like, okay, it's adding something to Life's ability ability to do stuff. And the shadow enhanced version of Lamassu. So if you were to combine base Lamassu with the shadow spell, the top and bottom path, it's yet another shadow spell where you need to have traps on yourself in order to not take lash. Again, very hard. In PvE, borderline impossible. But you get like 860 damage that you can, like, I guess, selectively target with top path. Not really that good. And the bottom path, it gives you very powerful 55 blades without even having to clear traps. But if you don't want to take a maximum of 2500 health from this, you still need to have traps on you to clear every round that the shadow creature associated with this shadow enhance spell is out for, right? Would I use this? I feel like you would only ever use the bottom path if you have traps on yourself. Otherwise, it's too risky. And at that point, Centaur seems fine enough for not even using a shad and waiting one extra round. I'm trying to see the bright side, but out of all of these teasers so far, Grenadier PvE path is the only one that really so far is good. Let's talk about base Lord of Jungle. The top path is a new AoE in PvE. However, pretty weak for 6 pips compared to Rat Spin. It comes with the extra utility of using absorbs on self. So I guess if you had like an 800 absorb on yourself, you would turn 10% of that absorb into a blade, so it would be an 80% life blade, I believe. I think that's what it is. Honestly, you could make a pretty powerful blade if you have a really powerful absorb, but most absorbs aren't 800 absorb. It's like a very niche way to combine Hungry with Lord of the Jungle if you want to go that route. It's cool, I guess, but what if you do an absorb? Your opponent hits, the absorb is weak, and then the utility on this AoE is bad now. Like, it's kind of whack, right? And the bottom path, definitely much cooler and much more usable, but basically it hits, and then it gives up dots for offense in terms of blades, basically. So for every dot that you give up, you get a 60% blade that's healing and damage based, so you get 2 blades per dot for a maximum of, I guess, 4 blades if you give up 2 dots. Yet another spell that already exists without using a bunch of pips, and honestly gives you better blades. If you were to give up 1 dot with Nature's Wrath, it's already hard enough to get 1 dot on your opponent. You can get a 65 damage blade and a 65 guiding light. I just don't think bottom path Lord of Jungle is adding anything to Life's Library. Now, the shadow enhanced version of Lord of Jungle, right? Now, this, at least in my opinion, much more usable. We're looking at 1000 damage AoE, as in you can enchant this after you make this fusion, and it also gives you 265 blades. Probably the best spell that Life is gonna get this update for PvE by a mile. Now, the bottom path of this is actually really cool, I would say, because this is very weird. But basically, if I'm reading this right, the bottom path does 755 damage and gives you 3 55 damage blades and 3 55 guiding lights. So this, I would argue, is worth the backlash, right? Very powerful blades that you could use for a whole lot of things. 6 of them, and they're all powerful. But once again, there's something weird about these spells. In order to reduce lash for both of these, the thing that you have to give up every round for 3 rounds to take 0% backlash are dots on enemy. Let's say that you want to reduce lash all 3 rounds of this out so you take 0% lash, right? You would want 3 dots on your opponent that are out for the next 3 rounds, right? In order to do that easily, you basically need to Spiny. That's a 10 pip spell, because it basically puts out 3 dots that last 6 rounds. 1, you would have to give the damage on this 10 pip spell up to not take backlash, and it would take 3 rounds for you to reduce lash. 3 rounds where your opponent could just remove the dots themselves and make you take backlash. So while yes, the new bottom path Lord of Jungle is really cool in the terms of the reward that you can get out of it, it's still extremely high risk. And finally, we have Wings of Fate, the new base Wings of Fate. We have a new AoE that hits everyone and heals every teammate, essentially. Pretty cool for not using a shad. I would say as a support spell, it's actually pretty good, especially because you can revive people while doing damage, and you don't need a shadow pip anymore. Pretty decent. And the bottom path Wings of Fate, it's a bomb dot, just like you would expect in advanced combat, I guess. It does a pretty decent amount. Very comparable to Burrowing Bane, which is also a bomb dot, but it does a little bit more because there's a life school pip involved. So really, the value of the spell is in the second part, right? It can give up to 3 blades for heals. If you need defense instead of offense, it's actually a pretty decent pivoting kind of spell. Now, what if you shadow enhance them? Now we're talking about some crazy ass damage, right? The PvE allowed version, it's a much more powerful hit, much more powerful heal, and once again, you have a helpful way to reduce backlash. These 2, you got to give up blades on self. In my opinion, that's a lot easier to do in PvE. So I could see a lot of people maybe pack a lot of triple blades, right? Maybe even have item card triple blades, just put 1 on you and then use this. Very easy damage, and you can give up those blades to not take backlash. And the bottom path, also very powerful. This one is also like so powerful that it might actually be worth the risk of the insane backlash you could take. So obviously, just like top hat, you have to give out blades, however, like on self. However, you get 1,000 damage in terms of dots, and you get 1,900 damage in terms of heals. I will say this about the heals. You're getting only 2 heal over times for 5 rounds, and they do nearly 2,000 healing. That is about as good as Rebirth, plus damage added on. The real key is obviously for you to get the best bang for your buck out of that healing, you want to give up blades. I will say this about bottom path wings. The amount of healing might make up for how much lash you take, so it's not as important in my opinion to reduce lash with this. And it gives the player a lot to think about, right? 3 bomb dots and 2 heal overtimes all in 1 round. In PvP, that's hard to do a lot about right away. I'll say this, y'all. I think this is really exposing how some school profiles just aren't good with shadow magic. I would argue that life got a lot of ways to reduce backlash that depend on what your opponent does, right? Like having traps on you. That's a little harder to control for. And backlash being a health-based mechanic just makes the highest health school. In my opinion, they got the shortest end of this thing. Let me know y'all's thoughts on this. I didn't expect life to feel like this, but you know what? I want to give my honest opinion because it is test run. Maybe they'll change some of these. I would love to see maybe a little bit more damage forward spells for some of these. I'd also love to see things that are maybe not already in the library, like, you know, trap to blade counters, for example, or blade to dots. There's already ways to do that on a life. I would have liked to see new stuff that are worth the risk a little bit more. That's just my honest thoughts. Let me know y'all's thoughts in the comments below. I look forward to reading all of y'all's comments. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Let me know what y'all think of the shadow spells. Y'all, tomorrow, it's your boy's turn to exclusively reveal the shadow spells. I'm gonna be doing myth spells and the myth shadow forms tomorrow. Should be a banger. Turn on notice for that. I look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow as well. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon. And yeah.